And then that feeds right into my presentation here, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about being export ready, what some of the benefits of exporting are for your business. Obviously you're here, which is already an important step, and then some of the resources that my organization, the U.S. Commercial Service of the U.S. Department of Commerce, provides to help you. Okay, so why should you export? If you hadn't heard this statistic before, 95% of the world's consumers and 70% of GDP lies outside the United States. So you may be doing business here in Hawaii or in the US, which is great, but that's only a small part of the global pie. Also, now it's easier than ever to do business in international markets due to the ease of business, government assistance like our programs and DBEDS programs and others. Also, free trade agreements have lowered barriers to doing business internationally. And it's also a great way to diversify your revenue streams from your domestic business. Sometimes we go through economic cycles here in the US, but there may be markets overseas that are taking off. You mentioned telemedicine, and I've been hearing in China that is a huge market that's really taking off right now, where the Chinese are going to a telemedicine center, and then US-based or Western-based doctors are providing services to them, and it's very lucrative. Some of the economic impacts of exporting: it's good for our economy, also diversifies our economy, and companies that export are less likely to go out of business, and they pay higher wages. So those are all things that we like to see from the Commerce Department. One misnomer about doing business internationally is it's only big companies that have the resources and capacity to export, when in fact 97% of US exporters are small businesses, which is 500 employees or less, and 75% have less than 20 employees. So most companies in Hawaii fall into that range. And the reason why we think exporting is so important from the Commerce Department is 7 in 10 new jobs are created by small businesses like yours. National Export Initiative was launched in 2009 by President Obama with a goal to double U.S. exports, and in that time we've seen record numbers of new exports. More U.S. companies are exporting than ever. Over 11 million new jobs have been created, and programs like the STEP grant that we were referring to earlier have come out of that and have become permanent through Congress. So it's a good time to get into exporting with all of the inertia behind some of the opportunities. So this shows some of the GDP growth figures of major developed countries around the world, 2013 through 2015. At the time that this chart was produced, U.S. was expected about 3% GDP growth in 2015, which is not an exciting number. It's pretty good over the last decade or so, but pretty mediocre growth when you look at 2015 for most of these developed countries. When we look at the next slide here, we look at emerging markets, and you see those figures over 6 and 7% growth in several of these countries. Now, these are big macroeconomic numbers, and there are a lot of things happening behind the scenes when we see these numbers. So for instance, in Vietnam, this economy is growing rapidly. It has a growing middle class where consumers are looking to buy U.S. products that are quality, have a good reputation. They're buying up in categories of products that they couldn't afford before. Also, the government is investing in new infrastructure in medicine, hospitals, roads, hotels. So that is one figure, but there's a lot happening behind it. And the reason I show these slides is because I want you to think about where some of those opportunities may be for your business. And certainly, we're seeing growing consumer classes in many emerging countries around the world. What are Hawaii's top exports? Well, our number one export is in services. That's travel and tourism. Whenever we have visitors coming here or students coming here to study, those are exports in tourism or education. We also have cosmetics, skincare is a big category. Environmental technologies are small, but it's growing. I'm sure you've heard about the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, and so some of those technologies being developed and the expertise has export potential. When we look at products, you see there agriculture and processed foods are some of our top exports. Bottled water has been Hawaii's top product export for close to a decade, although that's changed recently. Now seafood, specifically shrimp, has taken over as Hawaii's number one product export. Honey, coffee, papaya, macadamia nuts, these are all among Hawaii's top product exports. When we look at best export markets, this is a chart. Don't worry about these dots. It's just kind of give you an idea of what we try to do is match your industry sector, whether it's cosmetics products or a food product, with what countries in the world have the best potential for your business. And what I encourage companies to do is identify the path of least resistance. I'll talk about that in a minute. And we provide market research and market intelligence to help you identify where those dots are for your business. Now we're going to talk about export readiness, going global. I have been doing this work for going on a decade, and I have condensed all those lessons down to 3 key things that I need to see in a business for them to be successful. First of all, motivation. That's not something I can help you with personally, but I've seen businesses come through our office that are highly motivated. They may have an average product, but they get out there, they go to trade shows, they meet with buyers, they ask customers how they can improve their product or their branding, and they are successful. On the other hand, I've seen companies with great products, and there's one in particular I always think about it. It's a Hawaii-developed product. I believe it's $1 billion product with applications in the oil and gas industry, aerospace, biotech, and they just haven't put the energy and resources into promoting that product, and there's just kind of mediocre growth, not really going anywhere. But if they put the energy and the time into building that business overseas, they could be very, very successful. Number 2 is identifying the path of least resistance. So what markets can you get into in the least amount of time, the least amount of cost, least amount of effort, and generate the greatest return? The 2 countries that we get the most calls about are China and Japan. China, because it's in the news, it's growing, it's exciting. Japan, because we have a lot of visitors from Japan, a lot of cultural affinities with Japan. But those are 2 of the more difficult countries in the world to do business with if you're new to exporting. Not to say that you can't or you shouldn't, but when you're trying to identify that path of least resistance for your business, especially when you're starting out, it's probably not one of those markets to start with. And then 3 is identifying great partners. So as you know in your business now, even doing business here in Hawaii or on the mainland, having a good partner that you can rely on, trust, that's going to represent your brand, that's going to pay you, very important. When your partners are overseas in another country with a different culture, a different language, they're providing you all the intelligence on the ground, what's happening in that market, how it affects your business. It's really critical to find great partners off the bat. Otherwise, you can waste time, you can damage your brand, you can lose money in the market, and oftentimes it's difficult for companies to come back and recover from that. When we're looking at export readiness, there are a number of things for you to look at. So first of all, what kind of domestic success have you had with your product or service? And then you have to ask yourself, will those attributes translate to the international marketplace? Often they will. And I tell businesses, if you have a product or service that's successful in the US, I guarantee you we can find somewhere in the world where people will be interested in buying it, especially with the Hawaii brand behind it. But sometimes those attributes don't always translate. The example I like to use is poi. We like poi here in Hawaii, and if you manufacture a fantastic poi and you say, let's go export this, we're going to take the world by storm, and you show up with poi, you're going to have a hard time changing the taste of people in that country, no matter how well marketed it is. But think about your product and how it's packaged. We were talking about Japan a lot earlier. Packaging is critical in Japan. The Japanese are very discriminating consumers, and if the packaging isn't right, if the color combinations aren't right, if it doesn't feel special when they open it up, the Japanese are going to be less interested than if it's well marketed and well designed, and that's just one country. Production capacity. So if we find you a buyer in a new market, let's say Canada, and your sales increase by 20% in 3 or 4 months, can you meet that demand? Most small businesses cannot. But thinking ahead, so we're planning to export, we want to ramp up our production capacity, where do we need to invest to meet that demand? The worst thing that can happen is your product takes off, your partner in country says, we want to order 2 container loads, and you can't deliver. They may never come back to do business with you again. So thinking ahead and planning for that increase in production is key. Do you have the financial resources to invest in your production capacity if you need to modify the product for international, if you need to go over to the market to see and meet with your partners, to attend a trade show, to increase your brand awareness? Do you have those financial resources? If not, that's okay. We can help you identify where some of those resources are, whether they're grant funds, whether it's through SBA, whether traditional bank loan. But it's important to ask yourself now, where are those limitations and what do you need to do to address that? Is your management committed to exporting? Oftentimes we'll see when the US market slows down, businesses get interested in international because they want to see how they can offset their downturn in sales. But then when sales pick up domestically, they lose interest in international. Those relationships with your partners thousands of miles away, speaking a different language and a different culture, it's even more important to maintain those relationships, keep those relationships strong, communicate clearly and effectively over time. And so if your management isn't committed to exporting, your business might not be ready, and you might not be as successful as if you wholeheartedly put your time and effort, make it a core part of your business strategy to grow your international business. Does your company have a plan with goals? You know, sometimes we'll get a call from someone, they say, hey, I was just in Brazil for the Olympics, it was awesome, I think I can sell my Hawaii product there. Well, great that you went to the market, saw a little bit about it, but does that mean it's the path of least resistance for your business? Does it mean that Brazil is a good market for you? So thinking through and putting that plan together, and what kind of benchmarks do you want to have in growing your international business? And then do you have the know-how, the nitty-gritty in terms of shipping, logistics, getting your product from point A to point B in Hong Kong or Germany or wherever? Do you understand taxes and tariffs, regulations, getting your shipments through customs, methods, how to get paid is a critical one. Now, if most people don't have the answers to all those questions, then that's fine. That's why we're here, and we can help you to answer all those questions. But it's important to just think through, okay, what do I not know? And then where can I go to get help? And we can help you with almost all those questions. Common mistakes, not having a plan, just kind of winging it, going out there. Oftentimes we see companies who are really excited about export, and then they take what I call the scattershot approach. So they try to tackle 10 countries at one time. They spread themselves too thin, and they end up being not successful in any of those countries. Rather than identifying maybe 2 to 3 key markets and really putting your time and energy in developing those markets and relationships. Not having that management commitment to exporting, neglecting your export customers when local business picks up, reliance on inadequate partnerships. We see a lot of Hawaii companies get contacted by a business in Hong Kong or China or Japan, and they say, hey, we want to represent you. And you're maybe not doing any business there, so you say, sure, let's go ahead, let's go for it. Well, what can happen is a couple years go by and maybe you've lost money. Again, maybe the brand has been damaged in the market, and now you're actually in a worse off position than if you had never partnered with that business. So finding the right partner up front is really critical. And in Japan in particular, once you find a partner in Japan, it's treated much like a marriage. And so the Japanese see that relationship as exclusive and long-term. And if it doesn't work out and you need to go find another partner, oftentimes other potential partners won't even work with you for a period of time until the dust is settled, even if you didn't do anything wrong. We had a Hawaii company about a year or two ago contact our office, and their Japan company our partner fell on hard times, stopped paying them. So they were in arrears for about 3 months of payments. And so the business said, we're desperate to find a new partner, return to doing our business. And so they ended that relationship, but no one else would work with them. Even though the Hawaii company hadn't done anything wrong, they didn't want to step on the toes of the Japanese company. And so their business in Japan stopped cold. And they had been doing business there for years ongoing. So finding that right partner is critical. And then failure to modify the products for the local market. You were talking about that just a few minutes ago. The famous example is in the 1970s. Does everyone remember the car, the Chevy Nova, little pod car? No? Couple ahead? No? Okay. Anyway, it was a popular car in the US, and then Chevy took that car to Mexico and Latin America. They didn't change anything about it, and Nova means no go in Spanish. And the product failed miserably. Very simple little thing. We've seen a lot of this happening in China in recent years, including companies like Microsoft, Kentucky Fried Chicken have gone into the market and translated things, and either they've meant nonsense or something offensive. Kentucky Fried Chicken, when they went into China, they translated finger looking good to eat your fingers off. And that's something that's difficult for a major brand to recover from when they're out there promoting this slogan and people are scratching their heads. So trying to understand the nuances of the market, and you're not going to know this on day one, but relying on your partner for intelligence, going to trade shows, talking to your customers. Even here in Hawaii, we have so many international visitors, asking them for opinions about how my product is packaged, or what do you like about it, what could we improve on, and factoring those things into your product and your packaging is key. So again, kind of some of those keys: examining your domestic success, looking at how that translates, assessing unique or important features of your product or service, conducting that international market research, and I'll point you to some resources on that shortly. And then also looking at where international hits on your website are coming from. That can give you an idea of where there may be market potential, where there's interest in your product. Also, where are your competitors selling? So we were contacted by a noni juice company a few years ago, and they said, we're interested in selling noni juice to the Netherlands. We believe it's a good potential market for us. Can you check into it for us? So I contacted my colleagues at the embassy there in the Netherlands. They came back and they said, good news and bad news. Good news is there's definitely a market here for noni juice. Bad news is there's already 10 companies selling noni juice in the Netherlands. It's not a very big country, so it's probably saturated. You might want to look elsewhere. And I just learned the other day that if you go on googletranslate.com slash, I think it's Global Market Finder, Google Translate, maybe that's for translating websites, but Google has a search feature that you can plug in your URL, and it'll tell you what countries people are coming to your website from. And then you can plug in your competitors' websites and find out what countries their customers are coming from, and give you an idea of how that matches up with your customer demographic. So definitely worth looking into that.
What about actually Google Analytics will tell you about where your competitors in some respect?
Google Analytics.
Yeah.
Okay. They have a public-facing service, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. I just saw it in a presentation last week. You just put in a URL, and it'll spit out where. Alexa?
Yeah.
Okay. So there may be a few. Market entry strategy. The point of this slide is that the top half is everything you do in the U.S. as your business. But when you're looking at your international market, you're going to have to change your distribution method or model or business model entirely depending on the market and what it demands, depending on what kind of partner you have, their capabilities. And so sometimes that may just be, in country A there, a sales channel. And then your partner handles everything else. In country B, maybe you have to build out your distribution network. In China, over the last 2 decades, the most valuable companies that have been doing business in China had to build their own distribution networks because it didn't exist. And now they've been acquired, many of them, for billions of dollars because that was such a valuable asset. And so when you look at each country, the channel and the market is entirely different, and you have to take each one piece by piece and figure out what makes the most sense for you. This is kind of a rehash on some of the points we've made already, but identifying what your resource limitations are and how you can overcome them, focusing on a few key target markets, and always be looking for future opportunities to grow your business. I just learned that, do you know the camping brand Coleman, the green Coleman camping products? They have really taken off in Japan. And what they've done is they've found that the Japanese respond very differently to camping supplies and outdoor supplies than the US market. And so they have tailor-made many products for the Japan market that don't even exist in the US. 70% of their sales in Japan are products made specifically for that market, don't even exist in the US. And so when you're doing business in a market, always keeping your eyes and ears open. Trade shows are a great way to research, see what people are doing, what your competitors are doing. If it's chocolate, what other types of chocolates are out there? Do you want to copy that or maybe put a Hawaiian twist on it? And then factor that into where there may be future opportunities for you. Basic Guide to Exporting. This is kind of like a textbook on resources and issues, and it's a great thing to refer back to as you're going through. Maybe you have a question that comes up, and it's been printed in the past, but you can access the entire thing on export.gov/basic guide. It's now online and free to download. This is put out by our organization. Discover the path of least resistance. As I mentioned that earlier, it's so important. I decided to create a couple slides on this very subject. So a little pop quiz here for everyone. The World Bank compiles each year a ranking and ranks the best countries in the world to do business all the way through the worst country in the world to do business. I think there's about 196 countries that are rated there on about 10 to 12 different factors. So can anyone guess what is the best place to do business in the world? Any guesses? This is a quiz. Vietnam. Good guess. Not anywhere close.
I'm going with Singapore.
Okay, Rob is cheating because Rob lived in Singapore, and Singapore loves to shout from the rooftops that it is ranked #1 in the world, best place to do business year in and year out. Very easy place to do business. The rule of law is very strong. You will get paid. Your intellectual property is protected. English is the language of business. I think you can start a business in Singapore in like 30 minutes or something, right?
Less than that.
You can go on the internet and set up a business there. So #1. New Zealand is #2. Hong Kong is 3. Let's see. Where do you think Japan rests out of 196 countries? And it's Hawaii's #1 trading partner, by the way, and the one we get the most calls about. Where do you think Japan lies on that ranking? Any guesses? 100. Wow, I've really talked down Japan. That's not that bad. It's Japan is 29. So still in the upper echelon of places to do business in the world, but there are 28 other countries that are easier on a number of metrics to do business, generally speaking. Korea, I think, is 7. I'll have the list here in the next slide. So the 4 most populous nations in the world, what are those countries? Can we name them? What's the most populous country in the world? This is an easy one. Okay, China. What's #2? India. And India is forecast to surpass China around 2025. So that's changing. #3.
Ours.
That's right, USA. And #4, this is the tough one. Can anyone guess? 4th most populous country in the world. It's been growing astronomically, about 7% GDP every year for the past number of years.
I'm guessing Indonesia.
Indonesia, that's right, Indonesia.
Don't forget Africa.
Well, Africa's a continent, and actually Africa is a place where a lot of people are going now. There's an emerging middle class in many countries in Africa. But I mentioned this because Indonesia, the 4th largest country in the world, 18,000 islands depending on the tides, number of synergies with Hawaii. It's not in the top echelon in terms of ease of place of doing business, but when we talk about energy issues and sustainability, many of these same issues apply in a place like Indonesia. The United States has free trade agreements with 4 countries in the top 20. Can you name any of them? Take a guess.
What's the top 20 most popular?
In the top to do business in the world, of the top 20 best places to do business in the world, the U.S. has free trade agreements with 4. Singapore is correct. We do have a free trade agreement with Colombia, but it's not in the top 20. So Singapore is 1, Australia, Canada, and I just went blank on the 4th one. Australia, Canada, Singapore, and it's not Chile might be up there, but we'll see it on the next slide. Where does China rank in the ease of doing business index?
Ahead of the U.S., I bet.
Not even close. The U.S. ranks about 6 or 8. China is 90. And we already talked about Japan. So next slide, we're going to look here at all of these guys. Okay, so Singapore 1, New Zealand 2, as we mentioned. South Korea 5, U.S. is 7, Australia, Canada, Japan 29 there.
Taiwan's quite high.
Taiwan's pretty high, yeah, definitely.
What are some of the criteria they use to judge this?
There are about a dozen criteria. There's criteria such as intellectual property rights, so how likely are you to have your intellectual property compromised? How strong is the rule of law there? So if there's an issue and you need to sue someone or vice versa, is there a legal system in place that will allow you to to pursue legal action, how easy or likely is it that you will get paid in that country, how easy is it to start up a business, even a subsidiary, if you're operating a subsidiary in that country. And then I kind of have a few highlighted countries over here just for reference. Iraq, 156, and the reason I have that there is because Burma is opened up now, and we get a lot of inquiries of companies wanting to go to Burma. There definitely are opportunities in Burma, but you see where it's ranked in the world, and there are a lot of challenges in doing business there. So what I like to tell local businesses, if you're not already doing business in 10 different countries, ideally in that top 20 or 30, don't even worry about those countries on the other side. You'll get there eventually, but if you go too early to some of these countries, you'll have so many headaches and challenges, it could drag your business down and prevent you from being successful longer term. Path of least resistance, finding that easy entry point, that initial target market, developing some experience, expertise, revenue stream, and then reinvesting that knowledge and revenue into new markets that are more complex and hopefully more valuable for your business over time. This slide here is just to point out all the little nuances in terms of doing business in a country. And so, we talk about finding customers, that's great, marketing the brand, we understand that. But if we just parachute you into a country to do business, do you understand all of these nuances in that country? And no one is an expert on all of these things, and it takes years. Lyle, even you lived in Tokyo, and you still learn things about doing business in Japan.
I went to Osaka, and it's like
Totally different, right? So I just point this out as know what you don't know, and when you go in, try to learn as much as you can, and you'll be better prepared to do business, connect with the right partners, and be successful. One great resource is this book, Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands, and I have a copy of this on my desk, and anytime I'm going overseas, I'll flip to that country's chapter, and it'll kind of give you a readout, a brief summary on that country's history, what the culture is like, when you show up, what to expect. There's some funny little anecdotes. For example, in Japan, if you have an appointment to meet with Japanese partners, you should never, ever be late. When there is a set time, the Japanese are early. They're always early, and if you're late, they do not take you seriously, and they will likely not do business with you as a result. Conversely, in Brazil, you should expect your partner to be late by an hour or more if you have an appointment scheduled time. And when they show up, they're just going to roll in very casually, probably not apologize. This is very normal in Brazil. Very different. There are certain countries where when you're eating, if you're out to dinner with your client or partner, that you shouldn't eat with certain hands, right? Or you shouldn't eat anything until someone's given a toast or acknowledged who the guests are, this sort of thing. And then who's going to pay the bill. These little nuances, they all add up to understanding the culture and how to do business there successfully. And no one expects you to be an expert right off the bat. But if you pick up this book, do a little bit of homework when you get in. If you have people there you can trust, you can always ask them. And we have offices in all these countries, so you can always ask us as well, and we can help you. Just a couple quick stats on free trade agreements. We have free trade agreements with 20 countries currently. When we look at the numbers, U.S. exporters that are doing business in free trade agreement countries, the value of the exports to those countries far exceeds non-FTA countries. Here are the countries that we have free trade agreements with currently. And there's another free trade agreement currently being negotiated called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that would add countries like Japan, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei. Huge opportunity for the United States and specifically Hawaii, because Japan has so many technical barriers to entry. They have some of the strictest requirements in the world in terms of getting a product through customs and into the market there. A free trade agreement helps to streamline doing business there, protecting your intellectual property, getting products into the market, and eliminating taxes and tariffs. So these are some markets that you might want to consider as well when you're looking at that path of least resistance. The most recent free trade agreement that's gone into force is the FTA with Korea. which has been in force for just over 4 years now. And these are some of the numbers there. And after 5 years, which we're coming up on, 95% of the tariffs that were in place before this agreement will have been eliminated. All right, so now I'm going to share a little bit about our organization, some of the resources we have to help your business. But before I do, I just want to ask, does anyone here have an international office? An office in another country? No? Nobody? You're wrong. You all have an international network of offices in our organization, our agency, where your taxpayer dollars at work, and we have offices in 75 countries around the world to help you grow your business. So think about us as your international network to help you. All right, we're disappearing here. This statistic, the last time we did a little check on this, for every dollar in taxpayer funding our agency received, we turned that into $215 in sales for U.S. companies. Now, most government agencies cannot quantify a return on your tax dollar, let alone a 215 times return. But the last time we calculated, this was the return on your tax dollar and what we do. Some of our services, we can break them down into these 4 categories here. When you're looking at international markets, trying to identify that path of least resistance, I always recommend checking out our market research library. It's free. There are thousands of reports on industry sectors and countries and where the opportunities are for your business, and it's a great place to start when you're trying to figure out where you should target and what steps to take. So for instance, if you have a cosmetics product and you think Hong Kong may be of interest, you go on export.gov and you type in Hong Kong cosmetics and you pull up all this information. What are the trends? What are the requirements to bring that product into the market? Are there major trade shows that you'll want to attend or be aware of as you look to grow your business there? Also, country commercial guides are published by our offices overseas annually, and they're everything you need to know about doing business in Brazil, in South Africa, in France, from a U.S. perspective. What's happening in the economic world there, in the political world? What are some of the best prospect sectors? So where are, what we identify as the sectors where there are growth and the timing is right for you to pursue that market. So definitely valuable to check out those reports as well. And it's all free. Trade events. We have trade events all over the world. We take trade missions to markets. Usually they're sector specific to countries, and they're worth checking in on those on our website, export.gov. We have a whole calendar of trade missions that are going over. We have international buyer program. This is trade shows in the U.S., usually in the 9th Hawaiian island of Las Vegas, where the major trade show, most of the major trade shows take place. And we'll do matchmaking there for you with international buyers. Some of you may fall into the natural products area. The Natural Products Expo in Anaheim, California, I believe we do some matchmaking there every year. That could be a great show for you. Certified trade fairs are shows on the international side that we do matchmaking at those shows for you with buyers, and sometimes we'll let them know in advance that you're going to be there and try to put you in touch. And then a single company promotion. This is kind of a customized event. If you wanted to do a cocktail reception during a trade show and invite in potential partners, we did an event for Hawaiian Airlines when they were celebrating their anniversary a few years ago in Australia. They wanted to highlight that route, so we had a Hawaii-themed event, invited in all the VIPs from the tourism industry in Sydney, and it was a very successful event for them to connect with partners, raise their brand awareness in the market. Recently, we did one for a Hawaii pet products company in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and they want to sell direct to veterinarians because then the veterinarians will promote their product. And so we had a luncheon for this Hawaii company with about 30 veterinarians in each place, and that was very successful for them. So it's kind of a customized event if you want to do something in another market to promote your product. We have started a new series of events called Discover Global Markets, and we've done about a dozen so far. These are the events coming up. And these are really cool events because we bring in my colleagues from about between 15 and 20 different countries overseas. And then you have an opportunity to meet with them and learn about what's the potential for your product or service in their markets. And we've also started bringing buyers to these events. So we did one in Orange County in November of last year on Pacific Rim consumers. And we had, oh boy, I think we had over 400 buyer meetings with U.S. companies that we arranged at that event. So definitely keep an eye on this, and if you don't fit into one of these categories, you can just keep tabs on export.gov and see what's coming up, and we may have some more consumer-oriented events in the future. So you may have heard about the Gold Key service, and that is one of the things that we're most known for. At the top, I mentioned how important it is to find the right partners in country, and that's what this service is designed to do. So a Gold Key service is you'll come to me and say, I'm interested in exporting to Canada. I've done the market research. It's the path of least resistance for me. And so what we'll do is we'll contact our offices in Canada. We'll tell them about your business, your product. We may send samples over, and then they will contact potential partners that meet your criteria. So if you're looking for a distribution partner, or maybe you want to sell to the Whole Foods equivalent in that country, maybe that's your channel that you're trying to get into. Maybe you're looking for a home shopping channel type venue. Whatever your ideal partner is, we contact companies that meet that criteria, tell them about your business, and then those that are interested, and we've pre-screened, we introduce them to you and we schedule one-to-one appointments for you. All you need to do is show up. We arrange the venue, the translator, the transportation, and you have companies that are already pre-screened and pre-qualified for you. Because we're the U.S. government, it shakes out less legitimate partners on the foreign side, and it gives you immediate credibility in their eyes. So that can be a very effective tool for finding good partners in country. And the funds that Lyle was mentioning earlier, you can use those funds for a Gold Key and to go over to a market and find a partner in this way. International Partner Search is the same upfront searching for a partner as the Gold Key, but instead of setting up meetings, we provide you a list of contacts. I think the Gold Key is far superior because you get the meetings with it. We go with you to the meetings, and when you meet someone face to face, you're much more likely to be successful with them longer term than just emailing them and say, I heard you're interested. International company profile. This is important. This is a background check. So you may be contacted by people who want to represent you or sell your product or service, and we will look into their legal standing, their financial standing, and sometimes even send someone from the embassy out to interview them to gauge whether they would be a good partner for your business. Fuse is an online listing. So on our website, if you go to our Japan website, for example, sometimes buyers will go to that website and you can get a listing promoting your product and linking it visitors to that website to your website, where then they could go ahead and make a purchase. And Commercial News USA is an international magazine promoting U.S. products. It goes out all over the world. So we also provide consulting and counseling services to help you understand all those logistical questions I raised earlier, resolve trade issues, and advocate for you. Advocacy usually falls in for more firms that are going for big contracts overseas, but we want to make sure it's a level playing field and you have an opportunity to do business there successfully. Export.gov is our main trade portal. You can get more information on export basics, logistics, how to identify your HS and Schedule B numbers, taxes and tariffs for different markets. Our local website, HawaiiExportSupport.com, talks about upcoming local events and things more relevant to the local market. Export-U.com is a website with Export University type content. There's a really good tutorial there on pricing your products for international markets, so that's worth checking out. And then we have a few sites specific to key emerging markets there as well. We are a government agency, and so we're not allowed to make any money, but Congress does require we charge a few cost recovery fees for some of our services. So everyone here, I'm sure, falls into the small company category unless you have more than 500 employees. And so as you can see, though, those fees are very reasonable, I think, and allowing you to connect with partners overseas or doing background checks, and then large companies pay a fair bit more for those same related services. But anytime you have questions or you want to have a conference call, or if you're going to a country and you want to meet with someone, we can always set up something for you so you can get in front of our colleagues in that country.
Just one
Yep.
real quick point. going back to the gold key, I guess some of these other services, if you apply for assistance program, ISTA, you could apply.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some of our strategic partners we work with closely with all the folks here on this screen. Some of the key things for you as exporters, SBA has an Export Express loan, and banks love seeing you come through the door because if you go to get a regular SBA loan, the guarantee I think is only 60 or 70%, but if it's tied to an export deal, it's 90%. And so the banks love to see you come in the door and ask for some financing. If it's export related, they're willing to go to a higher level of guarantee and you're more likely to get those funds. They also have an export working capital program. XM Bank is another government agency and they offer export credit insurance. And this is to insure you against non-payment. So let's say you start dealing with someone overseas for the first time, you haven't exported before to this entity. For very, very inexpensively, you can get an export credit insurance policy that will kick in if they fail to pay you. Some of our other partners here, I'm going to talk about Hawaii Pacific Export Council here shortly, and then WUSADA. I don't think anybody here has a product with agriculture content, do they? No?
Unless, I don't know, pressure means fish.
I don't know. You know what the problem with fish, and this isn't me, this is Department of Agriculture, is they say we don't know if the fish that's caught is Hawaii fish or if it's caught outside U.S. borders and then is brought in. So I don't think fish qualifies for those programs, unfortunately. This is how our clients rate us. These are companies that have worked with us, and this is higher than many private sector companies, so that's a pretty nice score there. And here's my contact information. I know that was a lot of information, but does anyone have any questions about our organization, some of the resources, just exporting in general, strategy, being export ready?
So if you wanted that counseling, we just call and say,
Yep.
how do you do the counseling?
Yep, you can just
Where-
give me a call or email me and say I have questions, can we chat? And you know, usually if it's the first time we'll talk over the phone, learn more about what your challenges are, or we'll have you come in and meet with us. And then sometimes we'll introduce you to some of our mentors, perhaps at the Export Council, or we'll loop in our colleagues overseas at the embassy to find out more. Let's say you have an inquiry in Korea and you're trying to figure out what requirements do I need to meet in order to sell there. So we'll loop them into the conversation, sometimes do a conference call. So every situation is a little bit different, but yeah, you can just email me or call me and then we'll get that conversation started.